Hey everybody, it's Austin Ward. We're back for a Lettermen Live. It's Tuesday in Columbus, Ohio. The Buckeyes are 7-0, but that's obviously not the news of the day this week. Even coming off of that win over Minnesota, Nick Bosa will not return to the Buckeyes. He announced his decision to withdraw from school today. The star defensive end, his Ohio State career is over. Comes as a bit of a surprise, a little bit understanding when he's a number 1 overall draft pick potentially. But we'll dive into all that, what it means for the Buckeyes. Now, they haven't had him for the last couple of weeks, but still, not knowing that you're going to have the best defensive player in America back is a big deal. So it's Lettermen Live. It's brought to you by Byers Automotive. We appreciate George Kauffman joining us today to talk about those Buckeyes. And George, you can give us a little bit of the fan perspective before we go to Beanie Wells and Jeremy Birmingham for the former player and the journalist perspective. But big day. Anytime somebody makes a decision like this, it's kind of the new thing in college football to protect your draft status and get those millions of dollars. I just wonder what your first takeaway there was.
Well, you said as a fan. As a fan, yeah, it hurts. I mean, it's painful, but at the same time, I totally understand it. I get his point of view, and at the same time, I was kind of thinking about it when they announced it today. That I'd rather have him say that he's leaving now than leave the team kind of wondering if he's coming back. And some of the guys that have filled in for him, now they know this is their time to shine. Yeah. They've got some time to really solidify their spot on that line and not have to worry about what's going to happen in the future. They know that this is their time, and I wish Nick all the best, and he's always going to be a Buckeye. I love him to death, but we're going to miss you.
Yeah, it's a tough one, Beanie. From that professional side, you've been in the NFL. You've signed those contracts. When somebody is telling you to risk millions of dollars for something that he's not getting paid right now, if we're just going to cut to the chase. That's the way NCAA football works. I wonder how you came down on this as somebody who's been through college, had contracts in the NFL and all that stuff.
Yeah, it's a little bit tough, obviously, in a situation in which you're, probably slated to be somewhere in the, top 3 draft picks, and you're essentially telling a guy, you stay healthy through the end of the year, you're going to be looking at a paycheck in the range of, $30 to $35 million guaranteed. And obviously you deal with an injury that can kind of linger on and can kind of get worse. And obviously you know that at some point in time he had a knee injury in high school before he got to college. And, he has an injury history. And you know how people are at the next level when evaluating those injuries. They think of reasons why not to draft you as high as possible. And you really don't want that. So you want to protect yourself. You want to protect your future and that pot of gold at the end of the tunnel.
I wonder, again, this is a hypothetical, but this was a very hard decision for him for a lot of reasons. I think you found a justification for him to stay because he wanted to win a national championship and to go because of what you said, $35 million. I'm obviously never going to be in that position. Many of us aren't. It's hard to understand and say, hey, you should be loyal to your school. But just if you're in that locker room now and you were Nick Bosa's teammate, what do you think the mood is? How do you think that conversation played out?
I think guys understand, for the most part. I mean, obviously, I don't know if he, told those guys ahead of time. And I think guys probably would respect him more if he went to them and told them, before the media and everybody else found out.
Yeah.
If that was the case, then I think guys look at him a little bit differently. You obviously hold him to a higher regard and a different standard if he did do it that way. If not, then maybe you're a little bit salty because of it. But you understand the business move. You know that the ultimate goal when you go to a school like Ohio State is that they obviously go there, play great football, try to win a national championship, but the ultimate goal is to be able to go to the National Football League and be the highest draft pick you can possibly be. So those guys in that locker room all understand that.
Berm, I think, selfishly from my perspective, and I said this earlier on Tuesday, I wanted to watch Nick Bosa play more football. I wanted to keep covering him because, frankly, the way he was performing in those first 3 games was the best I've ever seen and covered. That's just me. I know there's other defensive ends that have been great and put up crazy numbers, but from what I've seen, the level that he was at and the way he was performing, I didn't think it was out of the question for him to play into the Heisman race. Maybe he wouldn't win it, but he was the best player in the country, and it was fun to watch him work. And so I'm kind of sad that I don't get to do that anymore.
Yeah, I mean, we see this from so many different ways. There is, of course, the teammate angle. You'd like to assume those guys knew what was coming. All those guys are there for the same reason, and that's to get to the NFL, as Beanie said. And nobody on that team is going to begrudge him for making this decision. And lest fans forget, and we've seen it as a reminder over the last few years more and more, this is a business, and these kids are making business decisions. And, we watched as Joey Bosa 2 years ago sat out for his entire preseason camp at the NFL and waited until he got the money he was due by the Chargers. the Bosa family is extremely cerebral and smart about this stuff. They would not have made this decision if they weren't 100% positive that it was the right move for Nick. But that doesn't mean it's not a hard thing for Nick to do. These guys are his teammates, his brothers. That's not a term they throw around lightly. And yeah, I mean, for everybody that's gotten used to watching him at Ohio Stadium, watching him and Joey in the last 6 years, it's sort of a bittersweet moment because this is the end of an era for Ohio State fans. And again, it's not like you're just talking about a guy that's a fan favorite because he's so nice and chummy. He's a badass football player and the best player in America. And to lose him when you're on your way to a national championship run, that's a sting. And it's just another one of those things this season that kind of feels like maybe this year is just going to be one of those years that Buckeye fans are going to look back on years from now and go, what the hell happened?
Well, the first 2.5 months have already played out that way. I wonder, there's been this discussion, and we don't need to have this debate right here, but if the NCAA had changed some of the rules of being able to capitalize on your likeness, let's say George Kauffman and Byers Automotive were sponsoring Nick Bosa this season, would this happen? I'm sorry, George, I don't mean to put you on the spot there. But
purely hypothetical.
Yeah, just a purely hypothetical situation. I'm not suggesting, I'm not even going to ask you to do that, but like, would a player be as willing to forego that shot at a national championship, which you only get once or twice realistically in your career, if they didn't have to put all that money on the line and they still had a chance to earn something in college? Again, we don't need to have that conversation, but it just feels like there's some sort of shift going on in college football, George, and it's taken away some of the enjoyment, I think, for fans when you have Denzel Ward sitting out the Cotton Bowl, when you have Nick Bosa now foregoing potentially 2 months of the season if he could have been back in November. I don't know what the solution is, but I can't imagine that people like that part of the business side really coming to the forefront.
I think so. I think you're absolutely right. And like Berm alluded to, I mean, this has just become, it sours it a little bit because it's become such a business type situation. I mean, you grow up thinking college football, these are, for first quarter of your life, like these are my peers. Like Beanie and I could have been roommates. I mean, you never know. Like
right,
these are
going to be in class, going to go to the bar together.
These are normal guys, and once they go to the NFL and everything, they become these superstars. But that college level is just there's something different about it. There's something personal about it. I feel much differently about the Ohio State Buckeyes than I do like the Cleveland Browns. So which I'm not comparing the two. I'm saying my professional and college thing. My passion for the Buckeyes is second to none. Like it's just. It's something that there's no other feeling like it in the world.
It always felt more pure.
Exactly.
And now it does start to feel muddied, and that's okay because again, everyone's going to college to get themselves ready for a job, right? And these kids
deserve the same.
They're student athletes, but you went there to get ready to go play the NFL, and Ohio State can't complain about it because that's written all over the damn walls at the Woody Hayes. You go to Ohio State to go to the NFL. I mean, you can't belabor the point and begrudge the kids for taking that step when that's what you told them they were going to do when they come to Ohio State to begin with.
And I think you have to also think nowadays how much social media is playing into play with everything. Now, opposed to 10 years ago, when I was in school, we didn't know how much the Nike contract was for Ohio State. Now, when they sign that new Nike contract at Ohio State, they know exactly how much it is. So as a player, when I understand how much the university is making, it's like, damn.
Right.
I need to go ahead and figure out, what's next for me and how much money I can make at the next level and when can I start making that money and capitalizing on my abilities. So I think now guys are starting to realize that a little bit more now than ever.
Does that change your enjoyment as someone who's played in college and as a college football fan, knowing that that's part of it now? Or has that always been the case that you're always aware of it?
I mean, I think you're always aware of it. I think it's just now more in your face than ever because of social media and because things are made readily available.
Across the board. I mean, they know what other players are getting. They know everything is instantaneous.
Right.
I mean, you find out something 2 months later, and you're like, whatever. Now you find out right away, and you're like, son of a bitch.
Yeah. I think
it makes it harder.
I wonder if that's influenced too, because I would say, and maybe I'm not the perfect test case for this, but when we broke the news after the Dispatch reported it and confirmed it at Lettermen Row later on, the reviews that we were getting back, the feedback on social media, I expected it to be a lot more comments about how selfish he was, how he needed to be a captain and go play with his teammates. There was some of that, but I would say much less than I expected. And I don't know if that's just because of Ohio State fans and appreciation for the Bosas, or if there is more awareness now that that's $30 million versus a couple games and a chance to win gold pants, which has its own value. Like I said earlier, you can't fault him if that's what he wanted to do. But I tend to think, Burnham, maybe you've seen it. You've got more followers than me, unfortunately. But
Follow A Ward Sports on Twitter.
But it seems like there's more understanding of that for college football, and also maybe more support for them having the chance to get sponsored by Byers Automotive.
Yeah, in general, I think that we've seen a large portion of sports fans change their loyalty from team or school specific to player specific, and understanding that these guys are the ones putting their bodies on the line every week, and these guys are the ones that are going out in front of 105,000 people playing. Meanwhile, ticket prices are going through the roof, and people aren't feeling that they're getting their money's worth, but these guys are getting no money's worth. And so it's reasonable, it's rational to say, hey, what are they getting back? And I'm not going to be surprised next year when the best rising junior in America decides to sit out the entire year completely healthy.
It's coming.
Because it's going to happen. If the NFL is going to continue to make guys wait for 3 years out of high school to play in the NFL, and we saw this, again, at Ohio State, always a trendsetter. We saw this with Maurice Clarett 15 years ago, but it's going to get to a point where guys say, you know what, why am I even going to risk my entire junior year when I can drop out of school now? The degree means nothing to most of these kids. You can start getting money from some sponsors and start making money off of the field, and then you just go work out for a year and get ready. You have 2 years of game tape. There's enough on there for people to say.
Or 1 year for Dwayne Haskins.
Right.
I mean, he's not coming back.
But especially when it's going to be proven.
Right.
When you're going to have situations like maybe Le'Veon Bell sits out an entire year and he comes back the following year.
You watch Earl
and he's
Thomas'
productive.
situation.
Exactly.
You watch what happened to Earl Thomas, and this stuff all trickles down. There's, as you guys said, this is on social media. We're watching sports evolve, and is it a good thing for fans? Probably not, but is it a good thing for the players? Of course it is. I mean, this is what these guys work their entire life for, and it is hard when you're looking for that purity of sport, but that doesn't exist anymore. And if we can stop pretending it does, I think people will be better off and start to see it more for what it is.
Well, Ohio State will obviously not just be folding up the wagon because Nick Bosa is not coming back. They're 7-0.
Do they still have to play this week?
They are going to play.
Oh
this
my
week.
gosh, this is unfair.
And they get to go to West Lafayette, Indiana, one of the worst college campus towns in America. And I think
It's like
Beanie,
the fourth time I've heard that today.
it's just true, George. It's just true. And I can say that because I went to school in Laramie, and I know that Laramie, Wyoming, is better than where Purdue is located in the middle of Indiana. So I'm an expert in that desolate college
Too bad
town.
we can't take Penn State's press box and put it in West Lafayette just to combine all of the worst things in college sports and put it in one place.
God, please no. Anyway, without Nick Bosa,
That idea is free, Penn State.
Ohio State has had a few weeks now, guys, to prepare defensively for life without him. It got really hairy for them without Jonathan Cooper last week, also at defensive end. Draymond Jones continues to deal with an ankle injury. He's not 100%, and Robert Landers could barely go last week with his nagging injury. Well, that's the entire starting defensive line. So, gosh, I wonder why the Ohio State defense is giving up some yardage. Some of that doesn't necessarily translate to the back seven. Talked about the secondary and the linebackers a lot. But this is an explosive Purdue offense. So, George, what is your level of concern with the Ohio State defense this week?
You know, honestly, I wasn't that concerned, but I was looking at the line just because I like to look at them, for no other reason. And
watch
Ohio
Betty B1
State is
on
only
this.
favored by 14, which makes me think, is someone knows something I don't. I don't think Purdue can outscore us.
Right.
So am I worried about some sort of upset? I mean, it's always at the back of my mind, but not really. I think there's enough talent, even with the injuries on the defense right now, that I think you can slow them down a little bit. And it's Purdue. Come on.
But it's this new Purdue.
I know. They got shiny helmets and everything.
On a Saturday night, a live crowd
7:30.
at Ross-Ade Stadium. I'm sure that somebody's got to be on high alert over there, right, Beanie?
Oh, no, I mean, definitely. I mean, I think Purdue's on high alert. No, I mean, they're a football team, obviously, that, they probably feel the blood in the water with Ohio State, knowing that offenses have been able to create big plays and opportunities for Ohio State in each and every last one of their games this year. So they're looking at it as no different. We're a team that, maybe we can, squeak some out. We can squeak some drives out and kind of give Ohio State a game. I don't think anybody in the country was anticipating Minnesota giving Ohio State the game in which they did last week. And I know every team that Ohio State faces is going to be looking at some of the things Minnesota did to give them that game and be able to sustain it. It's one thing to have those drives and those big plays, but to be able to make that matchup last like Minnesota did, I don't think anybody did that all year.
Surely you're not talking about RPOs and slants, are you, Beanie? I mean, you don't think people are going to be copying that?
Yes, indeed.
You know what Minnesota did, which nobody else has done against Ohio State all year, is not score on one play, because everyone else is just scoring on one play.
Turns out that was a bad choice.
Yeah, bad choice. So if you score on one play, Ohio State gets the ball back and can match you score for score. On Saturday, the Buckeye offense struggled to get into a rhythm because Minnesota was actually driving the ball and keeping the ball away from Dwayne Haskins. And if Purdue's going to beat Ohio State, they're going to have to do that. But what we watched from Ohio State on Saturday, and I think it was weird because when you're watching the game live, you're like, wow, Minnesota can't throw an incompletion. Every run is for 20 yards. They only completed 13 passes. It was just a carbon copy of each pass every single time, and it became incredibly frustrating to watch. They didn't score in the second half, but Ohio State only scored, 6 points in the second half. So there was something off that day altogether, and I know that we've talked about the Iowa game last year, and was the Purdue game setting up to be that. Maybe the Minnesota game was the Iowa game from a year ago, but unlike Iowa, who didn't make a mistake, Minnesota gave the game over to Ohio State by making some turnovers and missing field goals. But I think Purdue did themselves a disservice by having this be a night game, because I think part of the surprise element is wasted by not having an 11 a.m. game where you can have the Buckeyes kind of sleepwalk into that stadium. And, that's what has happened in the past. You go in there at 11 a.m. and all of a sudden you're like, oh, this is stupid. Why are we here? But now 7:30, Purdue's big recruiting night. They're going to have as big a crowd as they can. It'll probably still be 35-40% Buckeye fans, but
They bought those tickets a long time ago.
yeah, I mean it's Jeff Brom is a great young coach, and they've got a really exciting guy in Rondale Moore. I don't know that they have the horses all around to compete for 40, 50, 60 minutes against Ohio State, but they'll make some plays.
I mean, let's be honest. There's nothing that Ohio State and Urban Meyer like more than primetime games, road, national broadcast. I mean, very rarely do you not see Ohio State answer the bell and let their talent show in those situations. If you think that they're not going to show up ready to play for this one like it's Iowa, I have a hard time understanding that. Now, we'll know on Saturday at 6:30 Central if that's the case or not, but I don't expect this to be, as you said, one of those sleepy performances out there with the gray skies and 11 a.m. and nobody's ready to play. I also think there's something to this that, Georgia, when I got in the summer, everyone asking for question of the day topics at Lettermen Row. What's the trap game? Well, the easy answer was Purdue. I mean, the offense is explosive. We know what it's like to go on the road and play there, and people coming out sluggish. But I think the fact that that game has been circled for so long, hey, don't fall asleep here, that almost rules it out of the conversation. Like, Ohio State has everything to be ready for now.
I absolutely. In the Minnesota game, I think was that kind of slow down, wake up call, and all the gripes and groans about that game. A lot of teams got upset that weekend. Mm-hmm. I'll happily take our win. Then, how do you think Georgia feels right now?
Yeah.
Joe Burrow. So it had the settings for a kind of a upset, but I don't see it happening. I mean, the timing of the season and everything, it kind of, you can see it, but I just don't see it.
Isn't it crazy we're at a point now where scoring 30 points, throwing for 412 yards, 530 total yards of offense, winning by 16 points is a sleepwalk?
Yeah.
And you say they're throwing for 400 yards for the second consecutive week. That only happened one time in school history. What was our conversation like every week last week? Why can't Ohio State throw the football? Okay, well, now you can, and now everybody wants them to run the ball, Beanie. I know that you want that too, but averaging 567 yards of offense is pretty damn good.
We're spoiled and we're never satisfied. I mean, that's what it boils down to. When we get so comfortable and used to going out and dominating games, that's what we anticipate and expect week in, week out.
But and better than anybody, it's hard when you're 19 to go play your best 12 times in a row, 13 times. You're not going to play every game flawlessly.
But I think when you have been used to that with a certain coach, and when you have this expectation that you're supposed to be very, very good on a regular basis, and you have been so, and then all of a sudden you have that year to where you have these holes and these chinks in your armor. Those questions and concerns come about, like what's going
But is
on?
that
What's
real?
the reason?
Have the Buckeyes always been this? I mean, in Urban Meyer's tenure, if you look back at 2014, there are a lot of similarities between that season and this season.
Oh, somebody's been reading Lettermen Row questions.
Yeah, I mean, you know, there's a lot of things that feel the same, and we've watched this sluggish offense squeak by teams in the last handful of years. I mean, the Western Michigan, Hawaii. I mean, they've had these games before that. I mean, sure, they beat Hawaii.
You don't want to talk about the November of 2014 the way I did last
I don't
week?
want to talk about November of any month. of
Ohio
any
State,
year.
there's this. I hate this narrative that the 2014 champs got better every single week. They took the loss and they just rolled right through. Well, what about the 7-point win against Minnesota? What about trailing in the third quarter against Indiana? Those were the two games before the Michigan game. That was not a team that everybody thought, oh man, we've got to put them in the playoff because they're one of the best teams in the country.
Right, they had to win
didn't
59-0.
Yeah, like,
to make, even if they
It's a
would have
Big Ten
beat
championship game,
Wisconsin
put 'em in.
35-21 in that Big Ten championship game, they wouldn't have made the playoff.
Like, it's just not true that that's how that year played out. And you're going to go through a season where you struggle at times. And Ohio State has got to do that this year, and they haven't lost. Now, there's going to be tricky games ahead. You got Purdue this week. We've talked about that already. Michigan State is starting to play a little bit better. You got to go on the road there, and everybody knows how difficult that is. It's very hard to go undefeated. But if Ohio State has played their worst game or their worst couple games, and you get to grow from there, well, look out. I mean,
It's impressive, but I mean, we're still spoiled. I still want to see these guys be better, nonetheless.
Win by one, win by 100.
There's no doubt.
but isn't that what it used to be? Like Tressel, the 2002. Let's go back to that. Like,
No
if you-
doubt.
as long
Every
as you
game was
win,
tight.
like
I
that's
mean,
the
yeah,
only.
I mean,
thing
they
that matters.
required a last-minute interception to beat Cincinnati.
Yeah.
I mean, that. Look at the last two national championship seasons. They were both incredibly frustrating from game
Overtime
1 through
against
15.
Illinois. I mean, that.
And to expect Ohio State to go out and roll someone every week by 40 or 50 points is completely out of your mind. I mean, it just is.
Well, the Big Ten is also a lot better too.
Sure.
I mean, you just don't get.
We
to
don't get to
roll
play in a conference like the SEC where everyone's terrible.
up. Oh, boy, this took an unexpected turn.
I'm just
I was getting ready to head towards the finish line.
Not everyone's
with Byers Automotive and some game predictions for this weekend with Ohio State and Purdue. As George mentioned, it's a 14-point spread for the Buckeyes being favored. So, where do you guys come down? What do you think the final score will be this weekend, George?
I think it's going to be 49-14.
Ooh, the defense comes alive.
Yowza. George.
Offense getting back
I
up
think
here as
this is
well.
a game.
This
They
is the
know
one.
that people are questioning this game. The 14-point spread is going to, I think they're going to, at least I would look at it and be like, what the hell? No one has faith in us.
Yeah.
I think that they got something to prove. I think they're hearing a lot of social media. They're listening. They see that. They know people are questioning them, and I think they come and
49 points. Purdue has one of the worst pass defenses in the country in the Big Ten,
I
George.
think,
So
I think
Dwayne
Dwayne's
breaks
gonna
the
do
record.
another 400.
All right, 3 in a row.
Very nice.
Beanie, what do you got?
I'm going 38-14. I certainly hope we get another 400-yard passing day. He's going to break that record this year.
Yeah, it's.
I agree.
So he's got in the next Nick Clarkson, our man behind the camera, dug this up a couple weeks ago. You're looking at the number 11, number 12, and number 13th ranked pass defense in the Big Ten in the next 3 weeks. Purdue, Nebraska, Michigan State. He might break it this week and then break it 2 more times in the next 2 weeks. Berm, what do you got?
I got Ohio State winning 56-42. I really think
And a push on the number.
Yeah, I don't see the defensive backfield getting better.
Can we gif
Are
Beanie's
you
reaction, by the
being
way?
serious right now?
All right, fine. 56-35?
56-42.
56-35? Does that make you feel better?
What time are we going to get to leave the press box?
No
Jesus.
way they're scoring 42.
I think that
I'm going to need an apartment
Now
in West Lafayette.
here's my caveat is that it does the weather forecast is saying it could be pretty windy on Saturday night, winds in that 20-25 mile an hour range. That changes. I'll go with like 56-21. But because David Blau, I don't think
It's that flu shot.
I don't think Blau has the arm to really go out and chuck it around in real windy conditions, but Dwayne does. I just think that why would you think the Ohio State's defense is going to stop anybody?
42 points is a lot for Purdue.
I mean, Purdue lost to
remember-
Northwestern. They lost to, was it Western Michigan?
Remember
I mean,
2012 when they gave up 49 points at Indiana. There's these weird games. I mean, anything can happen. But I'm going to take the Buckeyes and they're going to cover barely.
That's not covering. It's
You're a
pretty-
cover. Let me be very clear. I don't
Now
know
it needs to be
anything about gambling.
57 to 42.
I don't know
at least.
anything about gambling. Can we just be clear?
You made that clear
Yeah.
already.
I mean, I think the Buckeyes are going to win. I think they're going to score a lot of points. I think Purdue's going to score a lot of points.
All right, Ohio State wins 49 to 21. That is a real cover, by the way. And we'll teach Burnham some gambling when we're on the road this week.
Yeah, I don't know anything about gambling.
We're going to get some road sodas and get that sorted out so that he can weigh in on
Where are
point
we
spreads
going
in the
on
future.
Friday?
Don't worry about it. We're on camera right now, okay?
But what if they want to join us?
Well, we'll talk about it. It's social media, as George said. We'll spread the word. He's George Kauffman down there on the far end. Thanks to Byers Auto for hanging out with us and sponsoring us here to bring you Letterman Live, talk about Nick Bosa and the Buckeyes. Beanie Wells, who joins us every week here for Lettermen Row, the guy helping us out there, former Buckeye NFL star. And Jeremy Birmingham, we'll just forget about him and everything he said.
Good idea.
And I'm Austin Ward. Thank you for joining us for Letterman Live, brought to you by Byers Auto. We'll see you next Tuesday.